Hello and welcome to Revelation, the conscious commentary on current affairs from SourceTV. I'm delighted to have on the call Dhyan Prasada, Gina Lazenby, Rita Hraiz, Fiona Radman and Jude Levy. And Rita has very kindly agreed to open this week with a discussion about the true meaning of the word revelation. So over to you, Rita.
Revelation means to have cut through the mire of duality, of separation, of blame. And it's when the brow center is open, the third single eye, that eye, the one that sees all, that one that has transcended the duality, to be able to witness the good, the true and the beautiful and go beyond doom and gloom and projecting negativity. And that comes from each individual having done the work, the purification, and got to the point where we actually are in that union within, that we've had that initiation of the alchemical marriage within, integrating our divine masculine, our divine feminine, and reclaiming our absolute innocence, our naturalness, our spontaneity, our ability to be in the present moment. And through being in the present moment, that takes a lot of being able to just sit with what is, the ability to witness, and it's a really diamond path, it's a very fine line, to be able to witness but radiate our own inner peace outwardly, as opposed to adding to the soup of disharmony on the planet. So revelation is, it takes 3 stages of initiation to have got to that place. It takes the alignment of the sacral center and the throat center, the first stage of coming into right relationship with ourselves, not misusing our sexual energy, for that sexual Shakti fire to come up into inspiration, into creativity, into conscious, aware manifestation, being a co-creator on the earth, helping to bring it into its bounty. And secondly, and most importantly, it's also getting through the next stage, which is the one where we go round on that emotional treadmill, consistently being irritated, aggravated, allowing our boat to be rocked by what's coming. To be in revelation, to be in that place of purification, that we can be actually telepathic, to really feel the essence and energy of what's coming without trying to put a projection onto it. And in that emptiness comes this beautiful place of inner knowing, a really deep inner knowing. And therefore, wherever we go, whatever we do, even when the situation looks really awful, we're able to see it from that liberated place of the brow being open, and being able to understand the purpose of this level of evolutionary clearing that we are seeing. And that does bring us to, for instance, Trump. You know, like, we could look at it and think, oh my God, this is just terrible. It's like, where have we gone? Or we can see, wow, this is interesting that we've collectively created this situation. We've got this person representing the absolute sum total of the darkness of all humanity. But are we going to just project it onto him, or are we going to look within ourselves to see what we've individually got to do and clear within ourselves, rather than separate and make it wrong outside of ourselves? It's about taking responsibility.
So Rita, sort of on a practical level, I guess the challenge is not enough people know this ability to look at the world and really see beyond the illusion. And this is the challenge, because so many people are caught up in the duality and in judgment, and in the fighting and the sort of and in the hating, and you know, it's so, and I've done it myself, it's so easy to kind of get drawn into the hating Donald Trump thing, and we're just feeding that same energy.
Yes, exactly. So there are basically what I've been talking about today comes from very ancient laws. There are actual laws and a science behind this process of waking up that brings us to the point of revelation. It's not like somebody can come along and heal your chakras and then you're suddenly enlightened. It's a step-by-step process, and it starts with that very first stage of being quiet enough, still enough to empty ourselves enough to hear the programs that are running within ourselves. The very first negative imprint that we've all got going on is this intense and rampant program of self-criticism, and therefore a consistent comparison and judgment of other people. So the very first tool, the very first stage, is becoming harmless with ourselves and coming into the compassion to forgive the imprints and to love ourselves enough to be able to truly love another person. It's really simple. In the Bible, it was described as, you know, when we know ourselves and when we can love our neighbor as ourselves, then we can actually bring peace onto this earth. So I like actually discussing it from the context of the Bible, because Revelation is the last chapter in the Bible. And in that, when it talks about the marriage of the bride and the Christ, esoterically, that actually symbolizes the union of spirit and matter. It means the light, the fire of our full totality of our immortal self being dissolved into the densest aspect of ourselves, the darkness of what we've all come up through, because every single one of us has come up through being unawakened. Our parents weren't awake. We didn't go to schools that taught us consciousness. We've come through the dark. In fact, this point of revelation, this point of the wake up on the planet, is the revelation that this is almost like a hell realm, with the children being abused and an enormous amount of hypocritical negativity everywhere that we look, and over-consumerism. That all comes from each one of us individually not being aligned to source. It's only when we come back to that alignment, that dissolution, that giving every atom of our body to the creator, of consciously saying, I'm here in service, please show me what to do, and to really let go of thinking we know. And that's when it can be revealed.
So let's just kind of,
as far as I'm concerned,
the next topic, because this week is on Wednesday, it's International Women's Day, and there was certainly discussion on Facebook, which I was involved in with Jude this morning, and I was questioning whether there should be marching for International Women's Day and women's rights, because it felt very yang and very masculine. So I'm really delighted to have Gina Lazenby, who is a power woman. I don't know if that's the right phrase even for you, Gina, and enlightened feminine, and Jude, all of us on the call. It's interesting that we only have women on the call this week as well. So Gina, do you think marching is the best way for women to assert their power within the context of what Rita said? I mean, this, how do we balance the energy, which is we have a very patriarchal system?
It's a great question. Marching versus gathering in circles, and I would say the answer is both. And it's interesting, you know, your expression of Women's March and holding your fist, because that, I think, is very much associated with the feminist movement, which was a movement that was very prevalent in the 60s and 70s. And I think what's happened now, there's been a maturation of that movement. There's a new feminism, because there are women and men identifying as feminists who weren't alive then. And so therefore we could take the name and call it something else. I mean, let's not get attached to labels. I'm actually hosting a women's gathering tomorrow night, because there's power absolutely sitting in a circle. What needs to happen now is women need to be seen, we need to be recognized, and we're not fighting against the men. Let me tell you about, I've just been to San Francisco, and I was interviewing for my radio show, The Rise of the Feminine. I was interviewing women there who had been on the march in Washington, who were from Washington, and women who were from San Francisco. And what they were saying was, I mean, this is a magazine I bought in America called Rise Up. This is what's interesting, and this is the gift of Trump. He has caused women to say, okay, you know, we marched in the 1900s, in the early days of the International Women's Day, because we were fighting inequality. And oh my goodness, are we still fighting that now? You know, are we still unequal? And the answer is yes. So this is a fantastic magazine, a one-off special done by Condé Nast about the women's marches around the world. And it talks about 600,000 women in Washington and nearly 5 million around the world. That is massive. And what they said about the Washington March, which was interesting, wasn't just women. It was a sea of these pink hats. They called them the pink pussy hats. And they had women, when they met in November, this initial group to organize this, how are we going to deal with the Trump conversation? What are we going to do? Let's have a march. Let's have it January the 21st, the day after the inauguration. We won't go to that. We'll create our own celebration in Washington. And then it took off around the world. What was interesting was there were 3 generations there. There were grandmothers, there were mothers, there were daughters, there were sons of women marching with their girlfriends, there were babies, there were family, there were men. And it was a women's march. It was a march of oxytocin. It was loving, it was joyful. Everybody, they could hardly move. They filled up Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the main avenue where the inauguration would normally have a sea of people. And there was no violence. It was just loving and wonderful and joyful. And it felt like it was the beginning of something. And this is the gift of Trump, because he is such a lightning rod for what some people are thinking about women and women's roles and how they see feminine. And he's not the only one who thinks this. He was voted in by people. So people actually think these thoughts and they're coming out, which is the gift. How can you deal with things if you don't know they're being thought by other people? So we go, wow, there's this shadow coming up. And also, it's not Trump. We mustn't get fixated on one person, because this is what the Republican Party are doing. This is what the extreme right wing are doing. They're dismantling a lot of social care in America. So I don't particularly want to talk a great deal about American politics, but we do refer to Trump as this man who says unspeakable things, tweets them. We don't like him, but he is saying things, and he has caused a new women's movement, which I think is exciting. And I think this is the first of January was the first of many marches. International Women's Day is kind of, it's, you know, I don't think we ever want to have an International Women's Day in March and us to be seen as a special interest group. We are 50% of the population. So the interesting thing about Women's Day is an opportunity to look at women's achievements. But I think each year or decade it has a different flavour depending on what the conversation is. And I think we're revisiting the whole question of the equality that we thought we had. And what we need to see is not just women rising, which we're seeing, but, you know, what I've talked a lot on my radio shows is the rise of feminine values, the values of compassion and caring, which we're beginning to see, which is what politics need. Politics doesn't need women emulating men. The whole system of business and politics is very masculine. Men are trapped in that as well. It doesn't serve them. It's a hyper alpha masculine, terribly out of alignment and exaggerated. And the women need to rise up and shift that with the men. And we also need to gather in circles, because that's where we get our batteries charged. That's where we get power and energy to move out together and be out in the world. So I think there's room for both.
Okay. Jude, let's come over to you. I know Venus is currently retrograde, so good time to look at all things feminine, I guess.
It is. And I'm very inspired by Gina and by Rita. But always by Rita. But Gina, you know, in one way I'm thinking, well, I don't even know why I'm on the program, because I agree with Gina, you know, pretty much 100% in what
we don't have to argue, by the way.
Really, and, you know, the love, the feminine, and the love that you talk about, and the compassion is something, hopefully, that is a feminine attribute at its best, femininity at its best. However, what's really interesting, Gina triggered me when she said that Donald Trump is a lightning rod, because as you may know, Rita I know knows this, Donald Trump has an incredibly strong Uranus linked to his moon and his sun. And Uranus was the god of lightning, amongst other things, and is the great awakener. And we have been having all this Pluto-Uranus, Jupiter-Uranus aspects. And we couldn't not have a Trump or something shocking, something that presses all our buttons, because at this moment in the world is calling for this awakening and this enlightenment. But also, when you wake up anger, you wake up passion, you wake up violence, you wake up love, you wake up everything. So it's like all over the place, flowing around. In terms of the feminine and the masculine and the energy, what I strongly believe is that, there are women and there are men, and there's feminine and masculine, and they're not necessarily the same thing. All women and all men, if you look at this in astrological terms, we all have Venus and we all have Mars. We all have the sun, we all have the moon. So within us, there's a balance of yin and yang anyway. So I was thinking about this because, yes, we need to sit in circle. That's for sure. Because by doing that and inspiring others, by others seeing us, by praying and by looking inwards at ourselves and in circle helping each other to do that, we are finding these values, we are finding the love. We all have duality, as you know. I mean, I have my inner battle with my sun and my moon, not in harmony. And so I'm continually sort of flitting between the masculine, the feminine, the yin and the yang. So to sit in circle is beautiful and brings out the best and is a kind of more internal process. But we need to get out and march. We have Mars as well, and we need to get out and march. And what I loved about what Gina said was it was a feminine march. So Mars does not have to be masculine, right? We can have warrior women. We can have the feminine warrior. I mean, look at Boudica. Look at, women, strong, powerful women throughout the ages. They have not been wilting flowers who've sat there and just sort of been receptive and tried to change their own inner selves. They've also got out there and spoken out, and it's inspiring to other women. I mean, 5 million women throughout the world globally cannot be ignored. And if 5 million women are marching, there's 50 million or 100 million or, a billion who are looking and thinking, yes, they're marching for me, I'm there. And so to me, it's the dance, it's the balance, and probably what is needed, just to finish, Rachel, more than bringing more feminine attributes into feminine circles, into women, is to help the feminine to take its place within the masculine paradigm, for men to find their femininity, to men to find their compassion. That's what I do. I'm an astrologer, but I work with businesses and I work with business leaders to help them find their values of compassion, healing, so it's getting the balance right. And if one day we go too far over to the feminine, nothing will get done. So, we need the action and we need the receptivity. We need both. It's a dance.
I'd love to just come back to Rita on that. Do you think the solution is to add more yang energy, or do you think it's about introducing more yin? Or is it transcending the whole lot?
I think that it's interesting. I just want to quickly say something. I didn't realise that March the 8th was International Women's Day, and I've got the launch of my new shop. So we're gathering to do a cacao ceremony, women together, to pray here in Avalon. So that's very beautiful. I feel that where the uprising and the marches that are taking place for the women around the world is a wonderful thing, because it is about saying, no, we are not going to take it lying down anymore. And no, we are not going to agree with your way of treating women or having the borders where people can't come back into their own countries. It's a no to what Trump is standing for. And I do feel really good about that. And Gina, I love that you say we need both. We do need the balance of both. We need to sit in circle, like you say, Rachel, and we do need to get up, stand up. But it has got to come from the place of not a fight, the quicker, and comes back to revelation, the quicker we can dissolve any aspect of fight within ourselves, the quicker that we can align our heartbeat to Pachamama, to the earth, and actually create from the place of no fight within. That means there's no fight outside. That's the only way forward.
Wow. Okay, let's bring Dhyan and Fiona onto this, and Fiona, I know you want to talk also about depression, which is an interesting other side of the whole anger conflict, is when we go into despair. Fiona, do you want to maybe just talk a bit about that, because that's an interesting trend that's developing, is depression being the number one disability, or the second disability on the planet?
Yes, it's really, really interesting, because just reading the news and watching the news recently, I've discovered that this year, from October last year to October this year, is the World Health Organization 1-year campaign of talking about depression. And there was an expert report released a couple of weeks ago which said out of 200 causes of disability, depression is ranked second to back pain. Okay, and they reckon there's about 350 million people globally with depression, and more women get depressed than men. And I had depression when I was a student at 19, brand new in London, didn't know a soul, living in a bedstead. And I just slid gradually into this depression. And it's characterized by withdrawal. So people who get depressed have less of everything. So they get less sleep, they have less appetite, less interest in life, of course, and then an increase in the negative. So more anger, more frustration, more sadness, and so forth. And apparently it's a major problem in Russia. Around 5 young people a day are committing suicide. And Putin has recently told his health department to come up with some new ideas. There's a big stigma around talking around depression. The point of the campaign is, let's talk about it. So all that we're talking about revelation is, please, let's be more open about how we are as human beings. Let's deal with our emotions. And everything that we're talking about is women's marching, but also women's gathering, people getting together and talking. And emotional intelligence has really improved recently, but just not enough. If we have 350 million people around the globe who are seriously depressed, a lot of them enough to commit suicide, we're not talking enough to each other.
Is this part, would you say, Fiona, is this part of what Rita said earlier about this being caught in duality, where we're wanting pleasure and wanting to move away from pain, and no one really wants to sit with the pain and the demons and the trauma and really heal the underlying cause? So it either gets buried under a blanket of addiction and escapism or whatever, or it just goes kind of unburied, as opposed to, because I think most people don't tend to want to sit with that darkness. Rita, let's just bring you in on this again, because it's a really interesting area, this really sitting with demons.
If we look at just the very fabric of society, just from how children after school are being sent to one activity after another, that even from childhood, it's all busyness, 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 constant doing something, and never making this space for this stillness. Basically, depression comes from, on a scientific level, depression basically comes from a non-alignment to the soul, not consciously opening to feel the transmission from the soul, which only comes through stillness and invoking the soul. So the key thing would be to reverse this, is that we make a conscious effort to teach the children to be still. So it becomes a fundamental practice that every day, and this is one of the reasons I'm doing this monthly webinar, is because something that was automatic for me since being a child. I didn't really understand, very few people do this, which is before going to bed, to lie down and journey consciously through your chakras, clearing things until we come to that inner peace, alignment and feeling good, which is when the soul's light can come in, and we've got then serenity, equanimity, ease within ourselves, and then obviously lack of dis-ease. The depression would be dissolved if every school was empowering to every child, and that there was 2 or 3 times a day time to stop and be still through sound and meditation. Very, very fundamental, that people understood how to journey consciously through their bodies and felt the frequency of their chakras. It would change immediately.
Okay, let's bring in Dhyan, because I know, Dhyan, you do a lot of live webinars in the morning where it's just like you in stillness, which from a marketing point of view, it's kind of a bit like snooker on the radio. It doesn't always work, you know, because people want entertainment. They do, you know, they want adrenaline and entertainment, and like, you know, and pauses and stillness is kind of, it's not built into our culture. So talk to us about meditation.
For me, I was very lucky, if that's the right word, from a very young age. When I was 7, I was living on Rajneeshpuram in America, in Oregon, in the Oregon desert, on Osho's commune. So meditation was kind of shown to me at a very early age. So I've been meditating, if you want to call it that, but it's actually our natural state of being, meditation, without the interference of the mind. And I'd like to just pick up on points that everybody said, really, because my understanding of what needs to happen in the world right now is that we need to build new communities, that it's actually about forming, you know, away from the government, maybe, or including the government, but certainly as there are so many of us that are waking up, it's about creating communities and then bringing those in and having women run those communities, so that we can then have the qualities that we embody as women, as woman, you know, as Mother Earth, because that's what we are. We're all divine aspects of Mother Earth. And in those communities, you know, change the way that education is, because, you know, I've had my own experiences with my son and education, and myself just not fitting into the system again from a very young age. And so there's clearly some very fundamental things that need to shift. And yes, I also know a lot of people who've had depression, who are on antidepressants. I know of quite a few people who have attempted to take their lives. And this is a call back to spirit. It's the frustration to be in the body, to be with the crazy monkey mind, and not be able to step away from that, and not understand that there's an opportunity to actually step away from that. Because we are all awakening beings, we're already enlightened. It's the cliche, but it is the truth. On the in ultimate reality, we're all fully awake, divine, completely whole, and perfect. It's only the mind, the goo of the mind, that makes us think otherwise. You know, we are the root, we are the light. And so we all have an inner guru. We can all bring ourselves from the darkness to the light. Quite often it takes a huge amount of suffering in order to be able to do that. And this is where depression comes in, being that call. It's that call back to truth, that call back to what's real, to the self, to God. And the way that the medical society, I forgot the right word, but I can't think, deals with these things, is puts them into boxes, doesn't look at the person as a whole, doesn't look at them as holy, as divine, sees them as, if we cure that bit, then everything will be okay. And then the medication that's given causes more issues than the problem in the beginning. And you know, for me, I just want everybody to be free. I want everyone to realize their own freedom, but we all have an individual journey. And so we cannot say that we can help someone heal someone, because they are already whole in themselves. They just have to realize it. And I know that might sound glib in a way, but we all have this journey, and we just have to be able to be given the space. And it's not, you know, we don't need to go in and keep attempting to fix people. But there are some fundamental things in society that really need to change, and education is a massive one. And the way that people are dealt with in mental health is another huge one, because more often than not, it's a Kundalini awakening. It's, you know, it's something that wants to activate the true self back into the body, and that's why it happens. This thought-built universe, it is like hell, you know. It's a creation of the mind. It can be hell or heaven. It's right here in front of us in this moment. Okay. And so we have a choice too. We have a choice.
Okay.
Don't realize.
Who wants to come on next? Jude and Gina. Jude, do you want to?
Yeah. Thank you. Very, very quickly. Thank you, Diane. I mean, what triggered there for me was that Dan was talking about the medication that people are given for depression. And I actually think that part of the problems that we've got now in the world is because so many people are on this medication. And in America, it's absolutely rife. Kids are put on it. All sorts of things like teenage bad behavior are medicalized and are now conditions that need to be treated, you know, or 2-year-olds behaving badly, you know, that's a medical condition. And so there's so many people on these antidepressants. And I think one of the side effects of this is that they remove compassion. So they dull feelings. You don't feel the pain, but you don't feel the love, and you don't feel the compassion. And I mean, I've just been given a whole bag of painkillers. Some of you might know I had surgery less than a month ago. And they sent me home with a massive bag of paracetamol, ibuprofen, Codamol. And I was in pain, so I was taking the paracetamol at least for a few days. And I was waking up in the hospital, right? And I was waking up crying. Every morning I was in tears, which, you know, I was in pain. I'd had my lung cuts, grief, whatever. But what I found when I came home, I took my alternative remedies, various oils and things that I take for pain, and I went into joy and bliss and love, and came into my heart and healed, and the pain went, and my body freed up. But as soon as I took the paracetamol again, because I ran out of the other or whatever, I would be in tears again. And, you know, I just think that the medication that we're taking, not to mention the food, you know, that isn't really food that so many people are eating. And this is so widespread in America, you know, here as well, but more in America than anywhere. And I think there's whole societies and generations that are devoid of compassion.
You know, just moving on from what you said about in America, if you have a child who's a little bit, I don't know, awkward, you know, they won't let you put that child in school unless it's prescribed Ritalin. You're expelled from school, so it's deeply embedded in the system. I had terrible depression, you know, 1991. It was my spiritual awakening. I'm grateful for the process. And I have to understand the physical side of that, the physical triggers, as well as, you know, the developing my spiritual nature and having been one of my awakenings. But I think now in the rise of the feminine that we're experiencing, our ability to talk about emotions is what's coming out in this feminine era. Because previously, you know, emotions were things that muddle things. In fact, they didn't do research on female brains because hormones went through the brain and disrupted the scientific data, which is crazy. So it's only recently that we've had research on actual female brains, which are different to male brains. And I think in this era of being able to talk about emotions, that's the first key thing. And, you know, the small practical things that we can do when we have an ordinary meeting, an ordinary gathering, is to have a check-in beforehand. How are you? What's up for you? And then you have people who are not used to these conversations say, okay. And then gradually as they build trust in that situation, they say, actually, this is how I feel. And the more senior a person in an organization who says, actually, my dog died, something happened to me, and I feel like this. It's a practice and a validation of having an emotion that's not okay, and that we don't hide things. And I think that, small clearing every time we're together helps all of us. And we all need to have the training in how do we deal when other people feel bad. We don't just cheer them up, we listen. It's a practice of listening to people. What are they grieving about? What are they feeling? And just being there. And these are basic human skills. We were talking about education. These are the basic things that we need to be teaching children. Teaching skills, learning ourselves. I mean, I remember as an adult learning to listen. Nobody ever taught me. I might have had 2 ears, but I always felt I had to speak to fill the gap. Nobody said, no, you don't have to. You should listen. So it was an adult skill that I developed in listening to people. I mean, I can't be the first person who's learned to listen. So, it's a life skill that I developed over my adulthood. And I think this is the key thing, if we learn to listen to each other, and then we can hear how other people are feeling.
I just think meditation really is a massive key to all of this, about being able to just sit with what is and allow the process and not fight what's going on within the body or what experience is arising in any moment.
Getting caught up in this changing the world thing and not going into battle with what is, to me, this is the biggest challenge that we have, of how do we create this new golden era without this feeling of got to fight the what is. And that, for me, that's a real practical challenge. Let me open back to you, Rita, on that. I'm sure you've got views.
Okay, thank you. It's absolutely to do with radiating that inner union, because basically the biggest thing that we can do individually to be effective on this planet is to really have this growing alignment and expansion, which means that more Kundalini fire Shakti can flow in union with spirit through our being, and it's to radiate that light outward, and through that's how we create the harmony. So it's everywhere that we go, when we're in that place of no fight, non-duality, being in the revelation, transmitting that inner peace, it just ignites more of that around us, because we don't give it anything to fight, and then beauty keeps unfolding. It's like walking this beauty way. It really is to do with that. That doesn't mean that we don't get inspired to open charities or support groups or sit in bigger circles of people. It doesn't mean being pacifistic, but it does mean being strong with that radiance.
Okay.
That's how I see the change.
Fiona?
Yes, it's really interesting, the whole conversation about practical steps of what you can do regarding meditation, because Deepak Chopra, who of course is a global leader and a medical doctor, he had a young man, a very depressed young man, as a patient many years ago, who wanted an alternative to the medication. And so he said to this man, okay, sit down for 20 minutes every morning and 20 minutes every evening and just be still. And you need a mantra. Here is your mantra, and just use this word for the whole 20 minutes morning and evening, and report back to me in a month. And after a month, the young man came back and he said, well, nothing happened for a while, but then I started getting glimpses of clarity, where it was like the fog of depression started lifting and moving and shifting, and there would be a glimpse of clarity, and then it would go. So he said, come back in another month. So after 2 months, the young man went back to see Deepak. He said, I'm getting more clarity. So just during the meditation, I can feel the fog lifting, and this process is actually working. And of course, the mantra helps to move aside the monkey minds that Dhyan mentioned and everybody discussed, so that he's clearing the mental processes and coming to what Rita's saying, coming to your true authentic self and the quietness and stillness inside you to your inner guru, which we all have. So in the practical terms, we said meditation, and this worked for the young man. He was well on the way to healing, 20 minutes every morning and 20 minutes every evening.
Well, transforming the world, we can only transform ourselves. It is all about us, and it is. I do think women will take leadership in the transformation because it so much depends on the inner journey. And if you look at, as I have done since the early 90s, when I set up a human potential centre in London in the early days of the early 90s, mostly attended by women, most books bought by women, most courses attended by women. It's mostly women in the conversations, a lot of male teachers as well. 80% women, it still is, it was in the 90s. So women around the world are waking up by themselves in groups, in unorganized groups and in organized groups and communities. And the men will need us, they do. I saw a movie recently called The Hollers, Hollars. And it's about a woman who gets a brain tumor and she's about to die. But there's a week where the men, her husband and her 2 sons, they kind of resolve things. And you see when she passes the central role she plays in their lives. And we do, we're fighting for equality, but take us out of the picture. This is what men live for. The love of a woman, family, caring, even though they don't have language around it. And as the whole world shifts, we are needed there to language in communities, on stages, and individual conversations in families about how we support men moving forward in all of us working together. So that would be my transform the world, is women keep on doing what we're doing.
Following on from what Gina just said, I think the greatest tool that we've got is the internet and the technology that, is a kind of a masculine tool, let's say. We need to learn to use that effectively, because there's so much on Facebook now about, say, plastic in the oceans or whatever it is. And then suddenly people are talking about it. And then suddenly, someone like Sainsbury's will come up with changing their packaging or something. So it's about, I think Gina's right. I think it's about women finding their truth, which we are doing naturally, talking with other women, but then getting that out and using this powerful tool that we've got now, where a thought or an idea or anything can be out and can go viral globally, in hours. And just, making sure that we connect together, we come together, whether we're sitting in circle, whether we're marching, but we communicate together, we work together, because that's the natural way for women. We're not individualist. We like to be in tribes. We like to have our mothers, our sisters, our midwives, our friends around us, so that we work together. And you're right. I mean, I work with CEOs. They're mostly men. And the first question you ask them is, how are you feeling today? And just help them to get into their feeling natures and, and to take a lead from us. Maybe it has to be a bit subtle, but that's the way we have to do it, I think.
What I feel is really important is just being ourselves. We're all these unique, beautiful expressions, and we all have these gifts. We all have something that we can offer whilst we're in these bodies in this beautiful place. So I think it's really important that we remain true to ourselves and we just radiate what we are into the world and take some action, and that will give the results that are needed. If we all do that together, then that's going to make the difference.
Well, I just wanted to conclude about, we've been talking about depression. So if there's anybody who's listening into this video who has depression, I'd just like to say a couple of things. One is, see if you can find someone around you who is non-judgmental. So whether that's a friend or a parent or an auntie, cousin, counsellor at school, university, just see if you can find someone non-judgmental just to start the conversation. Okay, so that's the first thing, is talking. And the second thing is, meditation really does make the difference. So there are plenty of courses out there. See if you can find a local course. There's lots on the internet you can find out. See if you can find a local course and get yourself on it.
Jude was mentioning about the technology being our greatest tool, and it is. I mean, we couldn't have the marches that we do. And what was interesting at Wisdom 2.0, the event I've just come back from, was, 10 years down the line, some technology founders and key people talking about reflections on the role of technology and social media in the election. And one of the things that came up that I really noticed was that there were all men talking about it. It's mainly male founders. It's a very masculine industry. And one of the things about the masculine is not thinking down the line, the joined up nature of the consequences of things. And they kept using this phrase, unintended consequences. So technology, we've seen this with Uber. If you've been reading recently about what happened in America, a case in Silicon Valley of a woman who said the culture is terrible and she left. It's very sexist culture, specifically at Uber and in most of them. So it's coming out, we're talking about revelation, and we're seeing the values behind the technology. And they came out with the technology and they're now thinking about values. So what's so important is, what are the values that are driving anything? And do they have feminine values in there? And the last thing to say is the power of oxytocin, because, when men march, it's the power of testosterone, and they know what to do with that because they come out with their riot shields, and that's what they counter, force with force. But when women march and we bring joy, love, oxytocin, and bonding and community, that's when we confuse the system. And so that's why we need to keep marching and bringing out the oxytocin.
I would just like to bring a conscious reminder to the biggest gift that we've got is to listen to our body rather than our mind, to recognize that our body is encoded with such a sophisticated, amazing system of 21 minor chakras, 7 major chakras, and 1,000 points of light known as our meridian system. When we let go of mind and ask ourselves, should I go here? Should I engage with this person? Should I do this project? Our body is going to be either feeling heavy, light, inspired. It actually knows all of what it is. So it's like dropping into intimacy with ourselves, into me, I see. Not look for things outside of ourselves. Don't think that somebody else has got the answer. There's no other oracle. It's just the dropping back into the body and loving ourselves enough to develop that relationship of intimacy so that we can increase our sensuosity, our sensitivity, allow our sexual energy to flow in its abundance so we can have telepathic union with all beings, all things. And that's how we're going to bring peace onto this earth. It's reclaiming of that understanding of the sacredness of our sexual energy that has basically been shut down for so many people around the world because they were made to feel bad about it.
Wow, thank you so much. It's been a really wonderful call, and I'm really grateful to you all for coming on. So thank you to Dhyan Prasada, to Gina Lazenby, to Rita Hraiz, Fiona Radman, and Jude Levy. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Bye.